Hey guys, how's it going? Here's a little update on what's going on. I got the new differential painted up and ready to go in. Transmission is cleaned up, put back together, ready to go in, minus the shifter bracket because I have to take the spring that holds the shifter onto the bracket is in the transmission that's in the car, where I currently want it on this one, so that's why that's not completed. This is the new differential that's going in it. This is something funny. I ran out of cobalt blue spray paint, which is this one. The last bit of it I used on the dry shaft, but yet I have the oil pan and dry shaft cobalt blue, and I wanted this to be painted cobalt blue. So what I did, I got this true blue, sprayed it on as the base coat, got this green silver metallic, sprayed this on a light coat on top of it, and then went back through with the true blue and did another light spray, and pretty much came out with damn near cobalt blue. And there's some spots on here that it got a little heavy with the green. See, in there you can see a little bit heavy on the green. But just from color misting it, I was able to make a cobalt blue third member without even having any more cobalt blue. So it's not too hard. If you think about it, you can do anything. Then here's the diff that came out of the car, that's shot. There's so much play inside that. I mean, look at that. I'm literally getting a quarter turn either way before that even budges like that. So that shows how blown out that third member is. If you guys were wondering what size tires and setup I'm running, these are 18 by 10.5 for the back with a +20 offset. No wheel spacers, and I'm running a 265 35 18. This is my back wheel. That's a big wheel. And then my fronts, I'm running 18 by 9.5 with a +20 offset. No wheel spacers. 235 40 18. And that's the wheel setup. If you guys ever have to remove a subframe by yourself and you don't have two jacks, as normally you have two jacks, one to support the subframe, one to support the diff, here's a way I figured out how to do it, and I have solid urethane mounts for the subframe and the the differential, so it makes it even harder because now you have no jiggle room of movement from the factory bushings. So what I did, left the coilovers on it, remove the CV axles, remove the dry shaft, loosened up the subframe bolts, loosened up the rear bolt over here, loosened up the other bolt over here, and I was able to drop the whole subframe as one, with still leaving it attached. So just drop the front half with the diff, and then all you got to do is just pull the diff out, and that's it. And then when it goes to installing it, you put the diff back in the cross member, then jack the whole thing right up and it'll go right in. Before, I had to drop the whole subframe to get this like this. Makes work a lot easier. So if you ever need to drop a subframe, this is the way to do it. Makes it a hell of a lot easier. And see, I undercoated everything. I went overboard with this undercoating, but it's worth it. And then what I'm going to do when I go to put the rear diff back in and subframe, I'm actually going to get an inner tube because they don't actually have the sheets that I'm looking for at the shop I was looking at. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm just going to get an inner tube, cut it to where it fits around the top of this, trim it to match and everything, and then I'm probably going to do 2 layers, so it's going to be like maybe a 2 to 3 millimeter thick rubber pad, and that's going to go between this and the actual subframe, or the actual diff up here to the unibody. So that will try to keep some of this vibration from the subframe transferring back into here, and I'm going to do the same thing with the diff. And that should make it to where there should be really no vibration or any noise from these solid urethane mounts getting transferred into the car. And if it seems to work out well, I'm going to do the same thing to my motor mounts and my tranny mounts. This is surprisingly still good. These are factory OEM axles, and I've blown up 3 transmissions, 2 dry shafts, and these are still perfect. That's surprising. Who knows how old they are? I'm pretty sure they're factory original. I got little dings up inside here. That's from this going into here, bottoming out from this little piece from actually having this camber bar cut too short towards making the whole subframe kind of go like this instead of being flat. So these are kind of binding up, hidden up inside here. And then these little mini links right here, once you actually get the camber tightened up as size and go, they actually start coming into contact with right here. On both sides. So that's something you kind of got to hammer out. But this is what everything looks like for now. Here's the front end. I haven't dropped the transmission, heat shielding, or anything yet. I just dropped the driveline and the rear end. This is going to be coming out. And this leak is actually coming from, I have an aftermarket fuel pressure or oil pressure gauge up on top, and it's leaking from that fitting right there. Tightened up the fitting, it's no longer leaking. I put a little bit of radiator stop leak inside of it to try to seal up the rear freeze plug until I actually get the time and money to pull the engine out, pull off the flywheel, replace the flywheel, and do everything else. Kind of want to do it all in one shot instead of half-assing it. Surprisingly no leaks. Just besides that oil from that little plug and this one back here. And the reason why this is leaking, because since that push bearing, or not push bearing, crush washer is destroyed in that rear diff, when you actually accelerate forward, it's pushing this into the drive shaft, binding up the whole gear case, and then when you go in reverse, it's actually sucking this back out into the diff. So that's why that's leaking. Other than that, everything else seems pretty good. And this is what everything looks like in here. Once you actually drop the subframe, you can actually get access to these two bolts right here. Because in the book, it's telling me, because I have the actual dealership book, not the retarded one you get from AutoZone, I have the actual dealer book. They're saying you can somehow get to these two bolts with that bolt and the other three bolts, or two bolts on the back side, and you can somehow remove it, which I can get to this bolt right here, I can get to the one up on top over here, but I can't get to this lower one, and there's no way of actually getting to these two unless you drop the subframe. So this is kind of my idea, to drop the subframe a little bit to be able to get the stuff out of there, but yet not having to drop it fully, because the subframe alone is like 250 to 400 pounds, somewhere in there. Because that rear diff alone is about 90 to 110. See, that's the brake caliper that's leaking. It looks like it's leaking from right up inside here. So I need to get a rebuild kit pretty soon and rebuild these. That's steel braided brake lines. Kind of dirty to see, but steel braided all the way around. Eventually I'm going to redo the rubber lines, because since I'm not trying to run super high boost or horsepower or anything, I can still keep the factory fuel lines. I just want to replace all the rubber because it's 32 years old and who knows how much longer it's going to last. Especially with the ethanol based fuels we have now. And old rubber hoses don't like ethanol. They'll chew it up. That's why a lot of RX7 has been catching fire within the past 10 years. Old dried out hoses, and then they run ethanol through it and eats up the hose, and next thing you know, you got a nice fireball. Yep, I'll have more coming up pretty soon. Get this diff installed, get the transmission installed, and get another video up for you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe.